Campus2Canton. Campus2Canton on the Better Sports Network.
Hey, look at this crew. What's going on, everybody? The Tailgate, brought to you by Campus2Canton, here with some help from our friends at Better Sports. Week 3 of the college football season, and we're moving along here. We've got so much happening now. I feel like that I think we just need to jump right in. Nick, Colin, Chris, with me here this morning. Might have another individual hopping in with us here in a few minutes. Guy, oh, there he is. There's Alfred. Okay, see,
Just in time.
That was perfect timing. Guys, I want to start the show. We usually talk about maybe some games that have already happened here, but I actually want to talk about something that is going to happen here in a couple hours, and that's a changing of the guard, apparently, with Alabama's starting quarterback. No more Jalen Milroe after their loss last week to Texas. They're benching him. They're going to Tyler Buchner, the transfer in from Notre Dame, followed his offensive coordinator over to Alabama this offseason. We thought this could maybe just be an eventuality because of that relationship. Chris, I want to come to you on this. Odd timing, and does this make Alabama's offense better in the short and long term?
Yeah, odd timing. I actually thought it was going to happen in the second half versus Texas last week, for what it's worth. But you've tailored this offense to Jalen Milroe's skill set, and now you're switching to Tyler Buchner. I don't know. It's weird. I understand why they're doing it. They needed to make a change. I don't think Jalen Milroe is the guy to win out, which they might need to do to make the playoff if that's still their goal, which it is at Alabama every single year. Does it make him better? Probably not. I don't really like any of the Alabama quarterbacks this year. I don't think, and I'm not sure Tyler Buchner is a big improvement. Tyler Buchner basically hasn't played football for like 6 years due to injury, COVID, sitting, etc. He's had like a handful of games, but he's really not played a lot of football the last 5 years, 6 years.
Nick, from a line perspective, you kind of have your different models that weigh talent and experience and some statistical information. How does a shift from Milroe to Buchner change how the numbers view Alabama this week and potentially moving forward?
Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, it doesn't really change much. It doesn't change really anything. Buchner, the way I calculate things, which we do individual player ratings based on their projection coming out of high school, the talent numbers by the good folks at places like 247 Sports and On3, adjust for experience and production, as you said. And as Mox said, Buchner hasn't really played much. He's been productive enough to add to that individual player rating in one game so far in his career. Milroe also just one game. They are not separated very much at all in terms of that projection coming out of high school. They're the same class. So basically they are the same person on paper on our CFP winning edge spreadsheet. So that, with that in mind, this move doesn't move the needle really at all for me. And I did think that personally the timing was a little strange, because if you thought 2 weeks ago Milroe gave you the better chance to win coming into the season, this particular spot on the calendar going to USF seemed like an opportunity sort of to get right, build some momentum before really getting into sort of a tough start to SEC play next week, and making the move. I don't know, just struck me as a little bit odd. I thought Buchner had a chance to win this job coming out of fall camp. Apparently it was close enough that they feel they're going to move to him and give him an opportunity here. But the timing was particularly odd, and I'm not 100% sure I would have done it this way. But obviously people know a lot more than me making those decisions.
Colin, we've lamented the usage of the wide receivers at Alabama so far this season. Been tough to trust any of them from a fantasy perspective. Do you think that this makes maybe one or two guys more viable on a weekly basis?
I don't really think Buckner's that much better of a passer than Milroe, maybe slightly, but we really haven't seen it that much from Buckner because, like, Chris and the other guys have been saying, like, he hasn't really played much. So I think he's a slightly better passer, so maybe it upgrades them a little bit. But I think the big thing for the wide receiver core is we're starting to see that take shape a little bit more over the last 2 weeks. Malik Benson, the JUCO transfer, his snap share increased last week. I believe he played like 29-ish snaps last week. And Ja'Cory Brooks' snap share has fallen off. Isaiah Bond and Burton are now the two leaders in snap share in the wide receiver room. So we're starting to see it take shape a little bit. So that might stabilize the production. But I still think it's going to be pretty boom or bust weeks, and I think it's going to be pretty unpredictable until we at least see what type of passer Buckner is. But I don't think it'll be any worse.
Alfred, Ty Simpson, we thought could factor in at some point this season. And hey, we're only 3 weeks in. There's still a lot of season. Maybe we do see him. But at this point, is Ty Simpson toast at Alabama?
Oh, I don't think you can say he's toast. It's only the beginning of his second year. We do like to see the studs get started in year 2 at the latest. So, I do agree with that. But, yeah, it's hard to say he's toast. I liked Buckner, too, for a number of years. But I think, like what Colin said, I'm not sure he's a great passer. He's erratic. He's made mistakes in his limited starting time. He was mistake-prone in high school, even when he did play a lot of interceptions, although very exciting. I think Simpson probably would be a similar guy. He came from a super small school. In high school, although won at least one state championship. So maybe the transition to, Power 5 SEC football has been a little slow for him. I wouldn't say he's toast until if he doesn't play next year at some destination, whether it's Alabama or a transfer somewhere else and is the obvious starter.
Fair enough. What do you guys think about the whole quarterback situation, Buckner, Milroe, Simpson? There is a call-in link here in the YouTube description. Give us your thoughts. Call in here. And while you're at it, guys, drop some start-sit decisions in the comments. We like to get to those throughout the show. We try. Felix in the chat says, was Ty Simpson that bad in the spring game? I don't think he was bad. I don't know.
I thought he was better than Milroe.
See, I thought Milroe was a little bit better, but I didn't think either of them were like abject failures. I don't know.
I thought it was pretty close. If at worst, right? Like I thought Simpson was better. You thought Milroe was better. At worst, they probably came out pretty even. But Alabama said, no, neither of these are the guys. Then went and got Tyler Buckner after the fact. After Tommy Rees, the Alabama offensive coordinator, recruited Sam Hartman to start over Tyler Buckner. So, like, this whole situation's a cluster, man.
All right, guys, I'm going to ask you one final question, and I just want the name as an answer. More likely to see this season, Ty Simpson or true freshman Dylan Lonergan, who apparently looked pretty good through camp this offseason? Nick, let's come to you first.
Simpson.
Chris?
Simpson.
Alfred?
I hope it's Simpson. Jeez, he would be toast if he doesn't start over true freshman. So I'm going Simpson.
Colin?
Yeah, Simpson.
I'll be the odd guy out. I'll say we see Lonergan first, if we see either of them. But had to be different. Had to be different this morning. All right. One other note that I want to talk about before we get into some of our kind of weekly projections for the week here. Chris, I'm going to come to you. Would you prefer to talk about the true freshman who's starting at Virginia that's a little bit surprising at quarterback, or would you rather talk about UTSA's fallout? We'll leave it up to you here.
Oh, well, we'll choose your own adventure, huh?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Anthony Calandria.
Okay. I think it's a cool story. The guy that we didn't expect to start at all this year, or really see much.
Yeah, true freshman was, I thought, really good in the spring game. He and Tony Muskett both, played a good chunk of time. Jay Wolford, who I think was the assumed starter, was playing baseball, so we didn't get to see him. But I thought Calandria looked like really impressive, and he caught my eye. Comes in last week and almost beats James Madison, which, they scored 30-plus points, which doesn't really happen at Virginia. They're kind of allergic to offense. Then I thought he played really well last night. They ended up getting boat raced by Maryland late in the second half, but I thought he had another good game. And this is a guy who is certainly on my radar now. He's made a couple nice throws. Is he going to save Tony Elliott's job? Probably not. But I think Virginia might have their guy.
Alfred, you lead our recruiting team here at Campus2Canton. This guy was not on our radar this year, right, at all. I don't believe we ever discussed him, but I know you guys have a few more discussions on the back end that I don't see.
Yeah, no, I actually I got a cop to this. Like Chris, I think tweeted about this kid. I had never heard of him. I'm at a bar last night. I'm scrolling the stat sheet. I see the name. I click on him, and he's like fresh. That says experienced freshman in high school, which means he's a true freshman. Last year was in high school. Never even heard his name once. So I have no scouting report on the guy except what we saw last night. Kudos to Chris Mox. Maybe he needs to join this recruiting team because he found that one I had never. But it sounds like maybe you heard about him in spring specifically.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had never heard of the kid. I mean, he was quarterback 72 and ranked 1,463 in the 24/7 composite. So, and Virginia was his only Power 5 offer, by the way. Everything else was G5.
I don't think there's anything there that would have raised the signal for us to be interested in, right, Alfred? I mean, that doesn't sound interesting at all.
No, I go down the list on 3 stars, and I'll just watch tape of all of them, as far down the list as I can go. I'm not sure if I would have gotten a 1,400 or whatever that is, but guys that pop, sometimes you can just tell. But he was a name I never came across. I watched him last night. I mean, live little arm, looks pretty interesting. Looks like an interesting guy. So maybe Virginia really got something there.
All right, let's move into some of our weekly rankings here. Help assist us with some of our start-sit decisions. Again, go ahead and drop some of yours in the chat if you'd like, or give us a call in. That link is in the YouTube description, wherever you're watching. Let's start with the quarterbacks here, guys. Quarterbacks that we have projected. Projections really like Jalen Milroe. Unfortunately, as we said, that's not happening. So top guys this week, Shedeur Sanders at Colorado. I don't think there's too much surprise that he's a top guy this week. Tyler Shuck at Texas Tech. Sam Hartman at Notre Dame there. Jaden DeLaura at Arizona has had himself a nice start to the season. Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. Donovan Smith at Houston there. Connor Wegman at Texas A&M. Devin Leary at Kentucky. I think that's an interesting one, matchup based, and we can discuss that here in a minute. Kyle McCord off the schneid a little bit last week for Ohio State in at number 9. Michael Penix Jr., number 10 for Washington. Jordan Travis for FSU, 11. Cameron Ward from Washington State, 12th. Peyton Thorne, I think this is an interesting one, but again, another one that I think is based on matchup for Auburn. And then Jacob Zeno, 14th, UAB's quarterback, who's had a nice start to the season. Nick, any guys stand out to you in your rankings that maybe didn't sneak into ours? I know Austin Reed isn't there, but that matchup against Ohio State, I think our model did not particularly like.
Yeah. So it's always interesting to see how my numbers compare to these and others out there. And I definitely suggest folks look at multiple spots to kind of see what you kind of agree with coming in. And Austin Reed still, despite the Ohio State matchup, which obviously an incredibly talented unit, my projections still like Austin Reed this week. Have him towards the top of the list, which maybe a little bit of a surprise, maybe a little too optimistic. But I do expect that Western Kentucky is going to try their best to compete and give Austin Reed a opportunity to throw the football early and often. Malachi Corley sounds like is back and going to be part of the mix. So I think that he'll certainly have an opportunity to be productive. Maybe still we're a little too high, but yeah, I'm still in on Austin Reed this week.
Chris, I mentioned Devin Leary there is a bit of an odd one. Kentucky gets Akron today. Akron has, I know our Zips hashtag have not been great so far this year. Could this potentially be a smash spot? I mean, I like Ray Davis here a lot. I don't know how I feel about Leary.
Yeah, it's a smash spot. They're going to probably cruise. If you were watching the Akron game last week, though, they had a miracle cover, by the way. It was awesome. They ended up winning the game and covering. So that was fun. But yeah, I mean,
their line was less than 3 against Morgan State.
Akron's had a little bit of tough
I just wanted to clarify that. I didn't realize that. Ooh. Okay.
Yeah. So sitting on a 2.5 win total doesn't feel so good right now. Although they're pulling through for me. Yeah, I think that this is the get right spot for this passing offense. It has not been that good through 3 weeks or 2 weeks, and I think we have 3 really good receivers, like really, really solid: Barry Brown, Dane Key, Tavion Robinson. So I think we could have a big showing for this offense. I hope we get it, because I think they need a get right spot, or it has not been super impressive.
Have we heard any health update on Liam Cohen? Didn't he have like a medical scare on the sideline last week?
That I don't know, actually. Nick just shook his head yes. So apparently.
Yeah, I saw something about it. I think it was maybe Sunday that he had an event, and there was in a press conference with Coach Stoops. The next day, he was very vague, but said something along the lines of like, the people we expect to be here will be here, sort of thing. So I didn't see a specific follow-up, but I think that not 100% sure if he's back and going to be able to participate today. But it sounded like, fortunately, wasn't a super serious thing.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't heard exactly what it was. I had seen just that vague comment, kind of like what you were talking about there. But not that they need him in this Akron game, but I think if it's going to be a get-right spot for them, it would help to have all of the pieces there.
Well, that's just your opinion, Colin. I don't know. Colin, any names stand out to you? Will, can you bring that list back up there? Any guys in our top 14 here that you think are too high, too low? Maybe a guy you think should be in there that's not, vice versa?
I think Peyton Thorne kind of stands out as the name that is a little more obvious. I know it's like a softer matchup here, but I'm still not the biggest fan of that Auburn passing attack. But the name that actually kind of stands out to me is really interesting, and one I think that's worth discussion is Jacob Zeno, the quarterback for UAB. With Trent Dilfer coming in this offseason, we didn't really know exactly what that offense was going to look like this year. But Jacob Zeno, albeit in 2 softer matchups, North Carolina A&T and Georgia Southern, he's thrown for 291 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then 385 yards and 2 touchdowns, and is completing 84.5% of his passes, which is an absurd rate. So he's been kind of a surprise performer for me this week. And as we get into conference play coming up here, I think Jacob Zeno could be a really intriguing option moving forward. So I'm definitely keeping an eye on him on this one.
That's a good. By the way, says Cohen is coaching on the field tonight. It sounds like so. So he will be there, Colin. Take that.
Hey, I'm just asking questions.
Yeah, I'm sure. Alfred, any final thoughts on the quarterbacks here? Any names that are interesting?
Yeah, last time it was up on the screen there, I was kind of triple checking. Riley Leonard against Northwestern feels like a start. Is he a top 15 play? He hasn't been running as much so far this year, but he's a guy that can run in 2 touchdowns, 100 yards on the ground. I'd probably want to personally start him over Zeno or Thorne. Do we really think Peyton Thorne? I know it's Samford, but I believe it's Samford for Auburn. But they're going to run the ball probably a lot. I don't know. I think Riley Leonard is still, a top play for me, and Northwestern's just terrible. So they're in shambles. That team has no identity. They're going to be real bad.
It's interesting, actually, Alfred, that our rankings actually really like their running game this week, but don't particularly love Leonard. Probably a consequence of Northwestern getting gashed a little bit more on the ground here through 2 games, I suppose.
Northwestern lost to Rutgers 24-7 first week of the year. I just think they're real.
That game was not as close as the score indicates, by the way.
And Duke's good.
Really sick. I watched that whole game. It was not that close.
I'm sorry for you, Austin. But anyway, so I mean, Riley Leonard is still a guy that I'd be looking for. I'd start him with confidence personally. And so it was a little surprising that guys like Thorne, Zeno were up there. The rest of them seem pretty accurate. I think Sam Hartman feels a little high just because I think Notre Dame's going to they're just going to feed Estime, and there are 16 other running backs that they like to give. So 3 feels a little high to me, but otherwise looks good.
The one guy that worries me a little bit on that list, Travis, just because of the weather situation that's unfolding supposedly at that Boston College Florida State game. Chris, you've been tracking this all week. The game totals moved almost 10 points at this point, down, like not in the good way. Conditions could make it a little difficult for Jordan Travis. If I have other options, I might look that direction. You agree?
It has come down a little bit. I think it was projecting like 25 plus earlier in the week, and the track shifted a little bit the track shifted a little bit east. And so now we're looking at like 15 to 20, and then with like 30 to 40 mile per hour gusts, which is still not a positive environment. And there's rumors that Johnny Wilson is out as well. So that's another weapon for Travis. I think they run a lot. Plus the offensive line is pretty banged up. So there's a lot of concern starting Jordan Travis this week.
As we budget for next year, I would like to propose that we get a nice weather board behind Chris that he can motion and really visualize.
I have it up on my third. I have a third screen or a third monitor, and it's just the wind finder of the whole country.
Of course it is. The sad part is, like, I think that's probably true, but could also not be. I never know. I never know.
Windfinder.com. It's your best friend.
Let's pivot to the running backs here, our top running backs this week. And I think there's at least one or two potential injuries that we're going to be monitoring here, and we'll mention as we go through these guys. Let's see here. Number 1, Bucky Irving. Not too surprising there for Oregon. He's had himself a nice year. Blake Corum at Michigan, Audric Estime at Notre Dame. Kind of your main suspects there. RJ Harvey, I think that's an interesting one for UCF. No John Reese Plumlee, so perhaps they do lean on him a little bit more. Jade Knott, an injury here potentially to monitor. Left last week. I think they've been kind of wishy-washy. I don't know. Have you guys heard anything on whether they've confirmed that he's in this week?
I haven't seen the follow-up. I think
I haven't either.
One of the the word seems to be questionable, but not a lot of detail.
Yeah, never is.
It was an ugly fall though, so I'm somewhat skeptical we see him.
I am a little bit too there. Judkins likewise sounds like he's 50-50 today. So another one to monitor there. Maybe if you have a pivot, you move away from those two guys. Ray Davis, we mentioned earlier for Kentucky, seems like a good spot for him. Trevion Henderson, it's an interesting one because he's done well on lower volume so far this year. But how long can that continue? Will Shipley from Clemson at 9, Amarian Hampton, fresh off a almost 250-yard performance for UNC at 10. Jordan Waters, Duke there at 11. Carson Steele at 12 for UCLA. Ashton Genty at 13, and then Roman Hemby, who actually played last night and didn't do anything with his carries, unlike all the other backs there. So I don't know exactly what happened there.
He scored twice, but it didn't look good.
I don't know.
Twice was bad.
Yeah, I don't think that was awful process. Just he was not the guy that got the touches. Nick, we'll come to you again here first. I mean, besides those two injuries, anybody kind of catch your attention here?
Well, one that I know my ratings are quite high on that I want to mention as an injury potential to at least be aware of is Devin Neal, Kansas running back going against Nevada this week. Looks like a really, really good matchup, but he went down momentarily last week with an injury, and there have been some whispers that he could be questionable at best in this game. So probably want to look for alternative options with him as well. But other than that, I mean, there's not a whole lot of difference in mine. I definitely agree that Ray Davis is a nice one. UCLA going up against an FCS opponent this week, Carson Steele, and the multiple running backs they've got there. TJ Harden, I expect to be in the mix also, but yeah, not many disagreements. Certainly looking at my ratings.
Full disclosure, Devin Neal was in our top 15. I filtered him out just because it doesn't sound like he's really going to be playing today. But our numbers do like him as well. And even if he does play, I'm not sure how much volume.
Well, then, so if that's the case, though, because of the matchup, like Nick was saying, Hishaw, the backup. I mean, he might be a plug and play if he's sitting on your bench somewhere. Just throw him in a flex, given the matchup, and no Devin Neal. So
for sure,
still a Kansas player who's worth monitoring for sure.
Yep. Him and Daniels might shoulder a lot of that rushing load here this week. Chris, over to you here. Any interesting or thought-provoking, things from you here?
I think Jaden Ott's going to play. Just to follow up on that discussion, it sounds like he's going to go. I kind of like Jordan Waters for Duke a lot. I'm not surprised that he's ranked this high. He was a player I liked last year, and it kind of didn't manifest itself the way I thought it could. But the offensive line is playing a lot better this year, I think, overall. And so that gives me a lot of confidence in rolling out the Duke rushing game versus Northwestern, who, in past seasons, at least Northwestern was playing competitive defense, and they were in low-scoring games. That's not even the case anymore. Their defense is not very good. I mean, they did crush UTEP at home after being a underdog to a group of 5 team coached by Dana Dimmel, which I don't know even what that was, but yeah, I don't like the Northwestern defense at all. I think Jordan Waters is a guy that I'm rolling out with confidence today.
All right, the person that DM'd me earlier in the week and I said I wouldn't play Jordan Waters, I would maybe reconsider that if you're listening to the show. Colin, any names stand out here to you?
Yeah, I think Travion Henderson's the one that really stands out to me. He's been a little disappointing so far. He hasn't found the end zone, but he has been leading Ohio State in carries and yards. And I think this is actually going to be a smash spot for him. Western Kentucky's defense gave up 384 yards rushing to USF in week 1. Now, a lot of that was to Byron Brown, the quarterback, but they still got gashed on the ground by Naquan Wright. Gave up over 100 yards to him. I believe it was 122-ish. And then they gave up 155 rush yards last week to Houston Christian. So this is a soft rush defense. And I think, talking about Alabama earlier, I think Ohio State's another offense that kind of needs to start getting on track. And I think we could see that this week with Travion on the ground.
Alfred, I actually kind of want to ask you a slightly different question here. With so many guys, especially at the running back position, that are starting to get dinged up, what's your risk tolerance for kind of starting some of these guys? How are you, Devin Neal, Jaden Ott, Quinshon Judkins, all guys that are probably top 10 backs. They were healthy this week, but, maybe with the injury, not so much.
I'm pretty, how would you say it? If there's a whiff of an injury, I really stay away. And that's even in the NFL for my fantasy choices. And it's even more so in college because we don't get good information. I mean, at least in the NFL, you've got the weekly, daily practice reports and all this kind of stuff. In college, we really just don't know. And if there's a whiff of injury, I usually back away. Typically, you have a guy, that you can feel confident in on your bench to slide in. It hurts. I mean, it stinks, but I don't want to risk a 5-carry game, or they come out to stretch. And then when they come back out through the tunnel, you've got some student reporter saying, oh, he's in street clothes. And then you're sunk. So I guess some of the leagues that have those automatic subs, I guess you could be a little bit more, put the guy that you want in there. But even then, they only sub them out on Fantrax, for somebody else if they don't play at all. So if they play 5 carries, I just don't really mess with that personally. One name I wanted to throw out there, Michael Wiley for Arizona. They are playing UTEP, who got boat raced by Northwestern, who we just said is terrible. And I don't think UTEP was very good anyway, but then, the products on the field there, I don't have any advanced information about their defense, but I can't imagine it's very good. Anyway, the thing with Wiley is he's getting about 10 to 12 carries, but he's had 14 receptions in 2 games. And we all mostly play in PPR leagues. So I think he's a very nice play this week and rest of the season. And he could flirt being, on this list soon if he keeps racking up those receptions.
The Campus2Canton projections have him RB24 this week with an expected point total of just under 19 total points in PPR. So, definitely a startable guy there. And like you said, the receiving floor really helps him out. Speaking of receiving floors, let's talk about our top receivers here this week. I think mostly a crew that you'd expect to see on here. Marvin Harrison Jr. I think has been projected as our top guy every week so far. Had the 2 touchdowns last week. Very nice performance from him. Jared Brown kind of emerged as a go-to guy there at Coastal Carolina at number 2. Xavier Weaver, potentially the guy on a week-to-week basis at Colorado. I made a big trade for him this week. I think that could be the case. Evan Stewart at 4. Roman Wilson doing a lot with not so much volume there at 5 for Michigan. Jalen McMillan and Rome Odunze back-to-back there, 6-7. The Washington duo, they take on Michigan State here today. Troy Franklin from Oregon, been their top guy so far this year at 8. Luke McCaffrey from Rice, looked good last week there at 9. Tet McMillan for Arizona at 10. Jimmy Horn, we got another Colorado receiver there at 11. Jaron Bradley, been Texas Tech's leading guy so far this year at 12. Sam Pinckney, nice week 1, not so nice week 2 there for Coastal Carolina at 13. And then Lincoln Victor has taken over that slot go-to role for Washington State that's so valuable. Nick, I guess I'll come over to you here first. Names that you have potentially that did not finish in our top 14 here.
Well, one for sure is Jamal Banks. I know he struggled a little bit last week, wasn't super productive, but my numbers still think pretty highly of him, have him as a top 5 receiver this week. And perhaps that's a little too optimistic, but still think that with the matchup against Old Dominion, who now is playing at a much faster pace, especially think that it's a pretty good spot for him. And one that just based on raw production that we've seen so far this week that I think is worth mentioning is Gage Laverdane from Miami, Ohio. FCS transfer, just come in, had a huge season so far, and there's been a pretty strong track record there of having the top wideout, whoever it may be, just produces on a week in, week out basis. And right now that seems to be Laverdane pretty clearly, and he's been spectacular so far.
Nick, I picked him up at some places this week where I missed out on waivers, some guys week 1 for some big money. You're just sticking him right in the lineup this week. If you, you're not starting him over maybe an established stud, but if you've got a roster space there, you're doing it.
Yeah, I think so. It's just there's such a strong track record at Miami. Guys we've seen it has changed, hasn't been that they've had, one particular stud. We've seen 2-3 guys over the past few years. So I think that, we're not going to see 200 yards every week, certainly. And Cincinnati is somewhat of a tough matchup, at least historically has been pretty good defensively. But yeah, I think that might as well. If there's any, if I wouldn't necessarily slot him in over your go-to guys, like you said. But if you're dealing with an injury issue, if you've got maybe a USC guy or two who's off this week, I would slot Laverdane in there and feel pretty good about it.
Sounds like Quinshon Judkins is now doubtful. Just to finish that update, we got a couple folks saying that here. Chris, wide receivers, anybody standing out to you here? And by the way, Jamal Banks, we have projected about 3 points fewer than number 14 on the list there. So still definitely within that same ballpark there for you, Nick.
No, the only thing I would say is that it sounds like wide receiver Trey Harris, also Ole Miss, is going to be out as well. So, he's been pretty productive this year for you. Just take him out of the lineup. I think that makes Georgia Tech a pretty interesting dog in this game. For what it's worth.
How does that make you feel about Dart? Because it sounds like Zachary Franklin is probably, or Zachary, however you say it, is probably out as well. So, that's their top 2 guys there down. Plus, Priestcorn isn't playing either. And maybe no Judkins.
Nervous.
I mean, this is starting to get thin.
Yeah.
Nervous. The game total is still 63, so they expect points to be scored, but not sure where those points are coming from. Gotta be totally honest on the Ole Miss side. Probably just a bunch of randos, and I guess Wade, the wide receiver.
It's Riscano week, baby. It's Riscano week.
Riscano week.
Maybe so, but
Freshman running back.
lot of concerns on what that offense looks like today with names that are recognizable to the average person.
Colin, wide receivers, thoughts?
I think it's pretty interesting that both of the Coastal Carolina duo is on there, Jared Brown and Sam Pinckney. That offense has not been what we're used to. They transitioned away from that option type of attack that Chadwell runs now that he's over at Liberty. They have Tim Beck, so that's a little bit more of a traditional offense. Grayson McCall, the quarterback, has been solid, but the target share has been so funneled to Pinckney and Brown. They both have 13 targets. They both have over 100 yards. They both have a touchdown. And it's a soft matchup this week, but against Duquesne. But I would still be surprised to see both of these guys go off. I feel like I don't know which one is going to go off because Jared Brown offers that big play ability. But I think one of these guys is going to be a really good play, and one of them is going to disappoint. I'm just not sure which one it is.
Poor Duquesne's going to be broken by the time they get the conference play here with the non-con. Alfred, any final thoughts on receiver here before we go to break?
Yeah, I know we need to cut. One guy I noticed not on there, and please correct me if I missed an injury, but Emeka Egbuka for Ohio State should be fine, right? Playing, he's not on there. And I think we got two Coastal Carolina players. I think these two guys are probably both top 10, top 15 plays until proven otherwise. And Western Kentucky should be a game, where it's not like, just running people into the locker room at halftime. I think it could be an interesting little game. So I'd probably have him in there. And then also Luther Burden, just because he's going to get used in a lot of ways, the way Jared Brown does. He jet sweeps, end rounds. He'll run the ball in on short carries for touchdowns and things like that. He's just, you love a guy who's the player on an offense, even though it's Kansas State. That's probably going to be, not necessarily a barn burner. But I just like guys that you're going to funnel an offense through. And I think Luther Burden probably belongs in the conversation every week.
For what it's worth, numbers like Egbuka this week within half a point projection of the guys that were lower on that list. That's probably what you kind of got to look like. How close are some of these guys? And if, it's all close, then, you kind of start your favorites from there. Burden, not so much, only projected 16 points this week in that matchup against Kansas State. So that'll be interesting there. All right, we are going to go to break here. But when we come back, we're going to talk tight ends, then get into some other start sits and answer your start sit questions. So make sure you're getting them in the chat. This is Campus2Canton here on Better Sports.
It's college football game day, and we're getting you ready for all the action on Campus2Canton.
I like to eat my feelings. So when I'm like super sad, single serving pint sizes of Ben and Jerry's, I just start shoveling that in, and it makes me feel bigger and better. But so let's eat our feelings here. What we're gonna do today is we're gonna talk football players, food. We're gonna pair them up. Who is represented by what food? All right. I want to just shout out Hal Alexander in there for CMC. Christian McCaffrey is Rocky Road ice cream. A little bit of everything.
Yeah,
does it?
Going out.
I like it, man. You know it. I love me some Rocky Road ice cream. Bijan Robinson prime rib. You know what? Bijan Robinson prime rib with a baked potato and some cream spinach on the side. That's what I'm talking about. That is the King's dinner. And Bijan Robinson, I don't care if the dude from The Athletic says only 301, touches. You know what? In honor of Card Sharks, I'm going to say, guys, that I think that number is going to be a little bit higher there for Bijan Robinson. So get your knife, get your fork, you got your steak, you got your Bijan.
Yeah, that's what's up. You're on death row, and they say you get one last meal, and you just say Bijan Robinson.
Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, I'm totally down with that. Love it.
I got to jump in on one real quick because Mr. Scamper said Kareem Hunt is candy corn, and I actually had a player, Tyler Boyd, was going to be candy corn for me, and basically it's that Nobody likes it, but it's always there. It's always there, and somebody always puts their hand in and grabs some and has some, and they're like, well, and afterwards they're like, why did I eat that? That's Tyler Boyd. He always gets drafted, and he's just kind of there, and nobody knows why. Nobody knows why they take him. Nobody knows where it comes from. Where does the candy corn even come from? Like, it's just there. It's just there.
Almost don't want to break in on this one. Just enjoying the music here. Campus to Canton here on Better Sports to you guys. This is the Tailgate. We're covering everything that you guys need to know before the games kick off here today at noon. Speaking of all the information that you need before games kick off, head over to Fantasy Alarm. Sign up for a 7-day trial of Fantasy Alarm's All-Pro subscription. Get DFS content, NFL picks for week 2 free. So go ahead, fantasyalarm.com/NFL to get started on that. We've been hijacked. We've been bamboozled. I feel like Felix just went over my head here, joining in on the show here. Felix, the beard looks great. How's it going, man? How are you doing here on Saturday?
Love the show, guys. First time caller, long time listener. I will offer just one suggestion. A couple of weeks ago, you guys had on this very handsome, dark-skinned man, very strong jawline, looked to be totally jacked. That's not why I'm coming on today. I would suggest you bring him back on at some point. Excellent personality. I do have a question, though, about Travion Henderson. We've seen Ohio State's backfield. It's been split between Mayan Williams, Chip Trayanum, and now Travion Henderson. How much confidence do we have, one, in starting him this week against Western Kentucky and then projecting forward to the NFL? I mean, I feel like the 2024 class has been really shaky at the running back position, including Travion Henderson. So I would just like to get you all's thoughts on those things.
All right. Who wants to take this question for the handsome young caller in here from Kentucky? Chris?
Yeah, I don't really like the way Travion Henderson is trending. And really ever since his freshman year to now, splitting work. I don't really want to trust him today personally. I know Western Kentucky is a bad offense. Draft wise, I mean, I don't think we're at the position where there's going to be a first round running back in this draft. Mm-hmm. Maybe some round 2 guys, and maybe that's Henderson. But this class is a kind of a disaster, and I think Henderson is the front of that. And I don't want to call him a disaster or terrible or whatever, but he has not lived up to the billing of a 5-star Christian McCaffrey comp type player.
Colin, our Devy team, specifically Mike, has been talking this week about how he thinks this running back class is shaking out to be pretty weak overall. Travion probably a large part of that with how he's performed over the past couple of years. You agree? You think this is going to be a weaker class? And where does Travion fit into it as of today?
Yeah, I think it's going to end up being a little bit of a weaker class. It doesn't have that Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs at the top. And we lost a lot of like really solid depth players from last year. Guys like Zach Charbonnet and Devin Achane, who were a little bit further down lists. Tajay Spears, Izzy Abanaconda. So a lot of names left. There was a vacuum filled there. We kind of propped some names up that maybe we shouldn't, but the guys at the top are also disappointing. Travion has been a guy at the top of the list for a long time, ever since his freshman year. And we've seen him do it in spurts, and we just haven't seen it since. But like I said earlier, I think this is a get right spot for him, at least in terms of fantasy production. In terms of NFL production for him and NFL future, I am leaning towards he's not going to be a first-round pick, like Chris was saying. It feels like a top 50 pick, though, still, given his speed, his pass-catching ability. And then another guy at the top that we haven't seen much of this year has been Raheem Sanders, because he's been injured. So I think the fact that we're not seeing Sanders, who's another one of our top guys, we've been on him for a long time, I think that also depresses the perception of the class as well. Once we get Rocket Sanders back out there, we might view it a little bit more favorably. But definitely not the class last year's was.
Let's get into some start sits here, and then let's talk tight ends. Then we'll hit some start sits. Let's do that. Can't skip over the tight end stuff. Chris will quit It's just how he rolls.
I think it's in his contract, right?
I believe it is. I'd have to reread that, but I think so. So I think all the top names made it in here this week. For the most part, things are starting to equal out here a little bit. Tight end Ben Urasek at Stanford there, been their top target at 1. Corvaldo Fairweather is interesting there for Auburn. Our numbers just really like Auburn this week in the softer matchup there. Amari Nyblack has had a couple of touchdowns essentially that have had a couple respectable weeks out of him at Alabama. Cade Stover at 4 for OSU. Holden Stays fresh off a 2-touchdown performance last week for Notre Dame. Sneaks into the top 5. JT Sanders been very productive for Texas at 6. So I'm actually not familiar with Bryce Damas at all. But Nick, you have to tell me where your rankings have him. Similarly for Jack Velling there at number 9. But Drake Dabney at Baylor at 8. Corey Dyches, who actually played last night. We had his over in the Discord, and that hit. Everybody was happy there. Jared Wiley at TCU at 11. Max Clark at 12 there. Brock Bowers at 13. Realistically, you're just starting Brock Bowers no matter what, and then Luke Lachey at 14. Nick, any thoughts here?
Well, on Damas is a UAB tight end, which we mentioned a little bit earlier that offense is really off to a strong start this season. Especially the passing attack is much better than I expected. I was pretty low just in general, didn't know what to expect, but already I think I'm really starting to buy in. And yeah, Damas has been productive. He's not this high in my projections, but is top 35, and there's not a big gap between that and top 15 at this position. But I think that he's certainly an option worth considering because the tight end position is a little bit banged up this week. Aranda Gadsden, I haven't seen anything official, but didn't look good for him last week. I would expect he's probably not going to play at least this week, maybe a little bit later. I could have missed something, but that didn't look great at Arizona State. Conyers is going to be out this week, Jalen Conyers. So you're probably scrambling a little bit at the tight end position, and Damas is somebody who should be available in a lot of leagues, and I think is in a pretty good spot to be productive, continue to be productive. And I was glad to see Max Clare, the Purdue tight end, on that list as well. He's off to a good start, and they've got a pretty strong track record, both coaching-wise and within the program. So seems like he might be an option if you're in need of something last second as well.
You mentioned the tight end's out this week. If your league allows you to play Dalvin Smith at tight end, he's probably out this week as well. So that's another one that you're probably missing out on. Chris, you're the tight end guy. I mean, I don't know. Tell us how it is here for this week.
Yeah, the only thing that really stands out to me, and I think our rankings this week did a pretty good job overall of getting it right, because it is a model. It is something that we a lot of data points go into. It's not necessarily human put it like saying, hey, like this is what I think. A lot of data points go into that. So I think we did a good job overall. But I think I would have Luke Lachey a little bit higher. He's been really involved for Iowa 2 solid weeks. They get Western Michigan. I think Western Michigan might be, if they're not the worst, they're bottom 5 team in the country. They got dominated by Syracuse. Syracuse scored like 40 points in like 18 minutes of gameplay last week against them. So yeah, I think that I would feel really good about starting Lachey. The one guy that we highlighted last week, Harold Fannin, monster game, of course. That's our guy. You can't play him this week though. They go against Michigan. So looking at his last week, he was awesome. The whole offense was pretty good, but yeah, Michigan's too tough of an opponent to roll him back out.
I have a start 2 tight end where I don't think I have a choice. But I mostly concur with you there. Colin, any thoughts on the tight ends here?
Yeah, I think the one name that surprises me that's missing is Dallin Holker, the tight end for Colorado State. He didn't play in their first game and then came out in the second game and showed a pretty good connection with the presumable starter moving forward, Fowler Nicolesi. He had 5 catches on 7 targets, 47 yards and a touchdown in that one. They were on bye last week, so maybe some people are forgetting about him. Our model probably doesn't have a very high score for him this week because he's only played one game so far. But it seems like he's going to be a pretty prominent piece of that passing attack. And they go up against Colorado. They're going to have to throw the ball and have to score. So I think there's going to be a lot of volume for Holker this week. So he's somebody that isn't on that list that I do really like.
Our numbers have him as the tight end 22 overall. So not too far off the mark here. And in terms of like expected points scored, he's within 2 points or 3 points. So not terribly far off, like you mentioned. Alfred, any thoughts to wrap up tight ends here before we start getting to some viewer questions here?
Yeah, there's one guy. I don't believe I saw him on that list. Gavin Bartholomew for Pitt leads the team in receiving. Well, yeah, in receiving yards, scored a touchdown already. They're going against West Virginia. I'm not worried about that. I mean, the bar is so low for a tight end in fantasy. He's 5 for 118 and a touchdown. Like, there's guys on this list who have not even done that this year. I don't think the matchup should preclude him from being listed. So he was a guy I was surprised not to see, given the fact that like any tight end that an offense is going to look to frequently should probably be listed. What were our projections for him? I'm just surprised.
Let's see here. Gavin Bartholomew. We have him tight end 19. So, right in that range
probably.
Again, not too far off.
It's probably plus or minus how much of a fraction of a touchdown.
I think it's really a lot of those guys are very close. And I think a tight end really, the answer is either you have, Urasek, Maryland, one of those guys and you play them or you don't. And you're just kind of guessing every week anyway. So
same with the NFL.
Yep. Not much of a difference there. All right, let's get into some listener questions here, viewer questions. And it sounds like we already kind of answered Drew's question. He asked Drake Dabney, Theo Johnson, or Jared Wiley. I think I would play Wiley here personally. But I think our rankings technically probably had Dabney a spot or two higher. What do you guys think?
Well, he did say he needed 2.
Oh, he needs 2.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll need 2. Ooh, I'm sorry.
But I would
Wiley Dabney.
Yeah, Wiley Dabney. I would avoid Theo Johnson. I mean, he had an off-field incident earlier this offseason where he got into a skirmish at a fraternity. So he's been in the doghouse a little bit, but they are starting to ramp him back up a little bit. So I think we could see in the coming weeks him be a growing part of this passing attack, but I wouldn't count on it right now. I would still take more of a wait and see approach with him. So I think that's pretty obvious, like Dabney, Wiley for me, and our projections do seem to agree with that as well.
Boots on the ground out in your state college. Thank you, Colin. I need an interview with one of those frat boys stat. That's what we need. Somebody asked Kanata Mumfield or Quinchon Judkins. With Judkins' injury, what do you? I mean, I'm not sure Mumfield's my pivot. What do you guys? What do you think, Nick? You're smiling.
Well, I noticed who asked, but yeah, I mean, Judkins. When Alfred said it earlier, when you see that note that there's a question, when it's questionable, I start looking to replace a guy even as highly regarded as Judkins, and now we see the doubtful tag. That certainly doesn't look good. So I'm probably replacing Judkins with my next best option, whoever it is.
Fair enough there. Let's see here. Let's get into some guys that we like or dislike this week overall. Keep dropping those questions in there, guys. Or if you've got a question for us you want to call in on, that link is in the YouTube description here. Alfred, let's come to you first here. Who do you want to start this week? Who are some guys that you think have some nice matchups that we should be considering that maybe we haven't discussed already here today?
Yeah. So, one guy who I have on a few teams and he's just been sitting on the bench. I try to pick guys that are not super obvious. There are a lot of mismatches this week. I don't think, it's most of the teams are good against teams you probably know are bad. I don't think there's a ton of nuance, but one guy is Mitch Griffiths, Wake Forest QB. He's got 5 passing touchdowns in the first 2 weeks of the season. I think that offense is continuing to just roll along even after Sam Hartman left. And, they're playing Old Dominion, who gave up a lot of points to some bad offenses, 36 to Vatech, 31 to Louisiana. Neither of those offenses are what I would consider very good, and they gave up 30s to both of those teams. I think this could easily be 3-4 passing touchdown game for Griffiths today. And so I think, it just depends on who your options are. But if he's on your bench, in these deep leagues, and you're starting 2 QBs, I would give him a look. And he also runs a little tiny bit as they do in that offense. So that would be my one. Do you want another guy, or do you want to round the horn first?
Yeah, let's round the horn here, and we'll sprinkle in as they come in from folks that are listening. Somebody here said Alar or Jalen Daniels. I like Daniels, Jalen Daniels. Any objections there?
I think I would play Alar.
Oh, okay, Chris will play Alar.
Daniels was one of my starts on our Campus Life podcast earlier in the week. They get Nevada. I think that's just going to be – Nevada got gashed by Idaho, who is a very good FCS team, but still an FCS team. And without Devin Neal, I think Jalen Daniels is going to have to shoulder a huge portion of that offense. So I think he's going to have a really big week this week, whereas Drew Alar probably won't be needed quite as much against an Illinois team that hasn't looked as good as we thought maybe they would entering the year.
I agree, actually. I mixed up my Kansases, but I was thinking Kansas State and they're playing Missouri. I forgot that Kansas had Nevada. So, yeah, Jalen Daniels.
Jalen Daniels, it is there. Colin, let's come over to you, a guy that you like this week that maybe we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, a guy I like a lot this week is Smoke Harris, the wide receiver for Louisiana Tech. He had a huge week 1, 11 catches, 155 yards and a touchdown, but really hasn't done much since. 7 for 47, and then he had 2 for 9 last week. But they get North Texas. North Texas gives up the 14th most pass yards in the country at 306.5. They give up the second most points per game with 52. And those games were to Cal and FIU. So not exactly potent offenses. I think this North Texas defense is going to be really bad, but their offense is good. I expect a high scoring game here. And Smoke Harris is going to be the focal point of that offense. I expect a huge game from him.
Chris, who do you like today?
I like Jalen Jones, the quarterback at Charlotte, who, this dude can play, man. I was really impressed with what I saw from him last week against Maryland. They get a Georgia State team who, to be objectively honest, I think is horrendous on defense. I talked about them being horrendous on defense last week, and then Connecticut scored like 3 points. So, but I do think this is a very bad team. Their secondary is depleted from what they had last year, and we watched Rhode Island, who's a pretty good FCS team, go up and down the field on them. I think Charlotte can do the same, and I actually really like the Charlotte team in this matchup. Wink, wink. For later in the show, and then I'm gonna sit. Are we doing sits as well?
We weren't. But thank you for letting me know that you haven't been paying attention, Chris. That is good.
Sorry.
Moving forward.
Sorry.
No, it's out of the bag now. Just say your sit. Just say your sit.
I was tracking line movement so that I could give us the best numbers possible. So my bad.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sitting a guy I sat last week, and I'm telling you can't play him. His name is Jalen Buckley. So Western Michigan gets the ball. Second play of the game, Jalen Buckley 75-yard touchdown. I'm sitting watching this game right after I gave him out as a sit last week, and I'm like, of course. Western Michigan does not score another point, and Jalen Buckley has 7 carries for 12 yards after that. I guess they got jumped on the first rush of the game. It was bizarre, but I'm telling you, can't play him against Iowa. So don't even think about it. He's getting a lot of carries. Don't even think about it. Don't try it. Keep him on your bench if you picked him up. Don't want anything to do with it. I don't think Western Michigan is going to score a point today.
Process was right last week, Chris.
Process was right.
It was Nick, and somebody who I know has been paying attention here. Who do you like this week?
Ooh, careful, because I'm scouring for injury updates. But I know.
I'm paying attention, Austin.
I definitely started paying more attention. You call out Mox, but there are 2 names that I went through and ended up playing more than I think I expected, and one I think is probably fairly obvious, especially if you're dealing with some injuries at the tight end position and you don't have a ton of options there. But Michael Trigg's in a little bit better situation than we thought coming into the season, especially with Prescorn out, with Trey Harris now out, with Judkins doubtful. Dart and Trigg are I think have the potential to hook up quite a few times today. And then one that surprised me a little bit more because he is sharing the workload, not a big name by any stretch, but Jalen Lucas, running back at Indiana, is, in my opinion, clearly the best player on the roster there, and is getting a little bit more and more of a workload each week. This matchup against Louisville is pretty good. Louisville really struggled in week 1 to stop the run against Georgia Tech. They're currently 94th in my defensive team performance numbers against the run. Very small sample size, of course, but that I think is a pretty good spot for Lucas, who can catch the ball, can certainly make some big plays in the return game as well, and I think is going to start getting a few more carries each week until he just turns this into a little bit more of a one-man show, and instead of splitting time with Josh Henderson in that backfield.
He was awesome last week, by the way, against Indiana
really
State.
good.
I mean, there was not a single player that could keep up with him.
Yeah, granted level of competition, but
smoked him though.
Yeah, he did look very good. Sits. We can run through these. Chris, you've already done yours. So you go browse some lines here, check some line movement while we do this. Alfred, somebody you don't like this week at all?
I don't like two running backs in Kansas State, Missouri very much. I think Schrader gets a lot of use, but I alluded to earlier, that game's going to be a little bit rough, I think, from an offensive standpoint. I don't think he's a transcendent talent either. So, I just probably wouldn't. And he might be a guy that you are starting because he's gotten pretty good amount of carries the first 2 weeks. And you might have him in a flex or something like that. But I probably wouldn't be too jazzed about it today. And then Ward, I thought he was going to be a little bit more of a bell cow for Kansas State, but they're definitely splitting with Giddens. And so I probably, he's a guy I drafted as a starter in a few supplementals, and pulling him. So that's a guy I try to give ones that like I'm experiencing or I figure might be on starting rosters, and I would pull him. You probably have a better option.
You're not telling people to sit Cole Cabana? That's not digging that deep. Is that?
No.
Okay. Somebody in the comments said Dion still has his shades on. He's live on game day right now. No respect. And I suspect that whole team is going to be wearing sunglasses.
On the sideline,
including Ralphie.
It's going to be
no respect.
Give Ralphie.
Oh
glasses.
yeah.
I had my sunglasses on before we started, and Austin told me to take them off. So
I did. I the respect levels here.
I also thought about it.
Chris is metaphorically wearing them right now because he just isn't paying attention to anything we're saying. So, Colin, who are you sitting today?
So I'm sitting wide receiver Keon Coleman for Florida State in this one. Now, the weather at the beginning of the week with the hurricane coming through is expected to be like 30-mile-an-hour winds. It is not looking quite that bad up there. I was just checking the weather report, pulling a Chris Moxley. It looks like the wind's going to be like 10-ish miles an hour with gusts up to 15. So not quite as bad with the weather as expected. But either way, I think that I've seen Johnny Wilson was practicing this week. So it is kind of up in the air whether he's going to play or not. We'll see if he ends up getting out there. But I think that Florida State's going to crush them on the ground. Boston College gives up 215 rush yards per game to NIU and Holy Cross. And that NIU team just got beat by SIU, the Salukis. So that's not a good NIU team. I think Florida State's just really going to run all over Boston College in this one. It'll get out of hand, I think, pretty quickly. We could see a line from Coleman similar to what we saw last week where he went 3 for 48 and a touchdown. But let's be honest, that's not really what you're looking for in somebody you're starting in CFF. That's only 13 fantasy points. So even if he hits that type of a total, I would still sit him this week.
And Nick, we'll come over to you.
One that it seems like every week I pick somebody to sit that it hurts my heart because Pofele Ashlock at University of Hawaii is off to a really great start, but that team is on the road this week at Oregon. And then Ashlock saw a little bit of a reduction in his role last week, a few fewer targets, fewer snaps, in part because Jonah Pinoque is back and he is in the mix. I would expect probably going to be a little bit more involved this week than he was last week, and saw some positive signs from Jalen Walthall as well. So that Hawaii receiving group, which, Ashlock and McBride first 2 weeks were clear 1 and 2 and in line for really productive, seemingly week to week workload, and still certainly could be. And I don't expect Ashlock to disappear, but it's getting a little more crowded, especially with Pinoque back and healthy. And then the matchup I just don't love on the road is like a 38-point underdog against Oregon this week.
Yeah, tough matchup there all around. You sitting like all their receivers, McBride, Pinoque, if you have them, just all of them hanging out on your bench?
I think this week, yeah. I considered starting Shager in a spot, but it's just overall a tough matchup for Hawaii this week. I'm not super optimistic that offense is going to be productive.
Fair enough. All right, guys, we're going to go to break here. When we come back, we're going to talk prize picks, which we have been doing pretty well on this year. Get you guys some wins over there. We are at the Tailgate here from Campus2Canton here on Better Sports.
Let's go to the running back report right now and talk a little bit about Christian McCaffrey here. That the Niners are going to take Christian McCaffrey off the field more than the Panthers did. And I can't. I mean, I think it was a Niners coach or maybe it was a Niners beat writer, Graziano himself, talked about like this could be an epic 1,000-yard season. And I'm scratching my head like, how does this work if he's going to be playing less, but he's putting up better numbers? Where's the disconnect in here?
The answer actually came out on DraftSharks.com earlier this year because I wrote the early round bust article, and now that the season's starting, I'll go ahead and reveal that it was Christian McCaffrey.
How about that? Early round bust, first round bust, Christian McCaffrey this year. Matt, enlighten us on why he is DraftSharks' first round bust.
This is the first reason, what we're talking about right here, because the Niners, for the first time in his career, have reason to not overwork him. The reason that Christian McCaffrey was so dominant in Carolina was because he was the offense. He was the leading receiver and the leading running back. He got a ton of touches, and he delivered with them. We already saw him in San Francisco get fewer touches than what he got in Carolina. He had his fewest receptions. He had fewer receptions per game last year for the Niners than he did for the Panthers. He had fewer touches when Elijah Mitchell was on the field. He had fewer touches when Deebo Samuel was on the field. They just have a lot of guys to give the ball to, and they have every reason to lighten his load a bit. And I'm not saying that that's going to make Christian McCaffrey stink, but if we need to take a guy in the first half of round one, we need a dominant running back, especially a running back, because he's one of the few running backs up there. He has to be a whole lot different than the running backs that we can get in round two. And I just think that the work he's going to get is not a whole lot different than what Tony Pollard's going to get, and not enough different versus the other guys behind them. And then there is that bit of injury risk. We have the injury predictor on Draft Sharks, and it does show he's not atop the position in injury risk, and Austin Eckler is up there as well, but it is above an 80% chance that he misses some time. We have him projected to miss 2.2 games for the season. So it's just, when you get more touches, I guess if he beats that first concern of ours and does get more touches than we're expecting, what he also does is increase the chance that he gets hurt, because that's just a fact. The more you touch the ball, the more likely you are to get hurt. So just when we combine all of that with the price of where you have to take him in the first half of round one, amid this, land of high target wide receivers, there's bust potential to him.
Man, the music this morning, just getting everybody hyped. I can tell we're all having fun here, guys. Tailgate here from Campus to Canton here on Better Sports, talking everything college football with you guys here today, leading right up to kickoff here at noon Eastern. Keep dropping those start sits in the chat, guys, and we will get to them as they pop up. Myron asks, Merritt or Kay Allen at running back? Nick, Chris, any thoughts there?
I think Allen is probably my choice. This Illinois defense is not the same defense it was last year. I mean, they were number 2 in my team performance numbers last season defensively overall, really, really strong against the run. And so far this season, very small sample, but they are a much, much different unit. Currently ranked 102nd in defensive team performance against the run, 112th overall. So I think Allen's in a decent spot, even though he's going to, of course, as always, share the workload.
All right, there we go. Let's get into some prize picks here, guys. For anybody not familiar, these are all totals for players, receiving yards, touchdowns, interceptions, you name it. It's probably on their fantasy points. That's usually the category that I go after. Pick between 2 and 6 of them. Choose, whether you need to hit all of them or a certain amount. And if you guess more or less on enough of them, you win. You get some cash back there. Promo code C2C, 100% deposit match up to $100. Nick, we'll come over to you first here. There are actually a lot of lines that I like on here this week, and I think these are all really interesting ones that you have listed here.
Yeah, so I'm admittedly new at the player projections weekly sort of thing. So I'm trying to figure out my own, what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, and so far in the projections, and we talk about these in the Campus to Canton Discord each week. The early player projections, mine are low on a lot of props, like going through prize picks and props. It seems like 80% of the time my number comes in on an under. So I pay more attention when they're an over. So those I tend to pick out a bit. And a player we mentioned earlier who my projections are much higher on perhaps than some is Jamal Banks, wide receiver at Wake Forest. 62.5 is very reasonable. I project closer to 90. And I know last week came up short, but there was a huge weight and some weather issues there. And this seems to be a pretty good matchup against Old Dominion. Colson Loveland, a personal favorite of mine, Michigan tight end, has been off to a little slower start this year than we expected, but 27.5. Again, also very, very reasonable. You can get that on one catch today against Bowling Green. One that my numbers have started to like more and more each week, and partly it's because he's just sort of force-fed at this point, is Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver at Florida. Projection is closer to 90.5. Tennessee, of course, operates at a really, really fast pace, so expect that Florida is going to have plenty of opportunities with the football, plenty of possessions, and Pearsall is usually option 1 and option 2, it seems like right now, for Graham Mertz. But one under that caught my eye, and I think is got some decent value, certainly compared to our projection, is Quinn Ewers under 281.5 passing yards. A little bit of a potential letdown spot today against Wyoming. If it is not, if Texas comes out and takes care of business, they probably won't need Ewers to attack downfield through the air very often. And so I think that our projection is something like 250. So saw some value there. And I think just sort of the spot, which Wyoming does have a pretty tough defense, especially in the front 7. So maybe there's some opportunity there to put some pressure on Quinn Ewers. So I think 281.5 is just enough that the value looks to me to be on the under for that one.
Yeah, that's a pretty good shout there. Wyoming obviously beat fellow Big 12 Texas school, Texas Tech there week 1. So, not an easy slam dunk matchup by any stretch. Chris, props that you like here today.
Yeah, I'm going a little off the board on all of these. We haven't had one of these this season. I haven't seemed to find value, but we got it back. Will Rogers, Mississippi State quarterback, less than or more. No, it's less than. I think is the right way to say this. Negative 7.5 rushing yards. I think he is looking at double-digit negative rushing yards against this LSU front. And he's been pretty bad with taking sacks. He's holding the ball a little too long because his new offense just doesn't highlight his skill sets. And LSU's front, I think, can get after him. And this offensive line has been pretty weak overall. They have not held up well against Arizona. He had negative 15 yards, negative 7 against Southeast Louisiana. I think we're looking at like a possibly negative 15-yard performance this week from Will Rogers, who does not run, so you're not getting any value there. He takes 2 sacks, and you're possibly out of this number. I like Ryan Coe, UNC kicker, to go over 1.5 field goals. Last week, we had Jonah Dalmas to do this. Didn't hit, but that game went under by its projection by 30 points. Really weird game between Boise and UCF. But I like this one because UNC might struggle to move the ball against this Minnesota team, considering Drake May has no weapons currently. Nobody really catch passes. That's super talented. So I think they might settle for field goals. We know Mac Brown is not a super aggressive coach. So I could see Ryan Coe kicking 2 or 3 field goals in this game. Then give me DJU to go over 0.5 interception. San Diego State's defense has been pretty good against the pass. They're second actually in turnovers, interceptions specifically. And Cedarius Barfield I think he has 2 interceptions already. He's been really solid for this team. So I'm thinking we're going to get a DJU turnover. We haven't had one this year, but he's been playing. He hasn't had to throw the ball a whole lot and hasn't had to be challenged. I think the San Diego State defense can get him into an uncomfortable situation. They're not as good as they have been in the past, but they are forcing turnovers. So give me DJU over half an interception.
I love it. I always love those interception plays, and I'm glad that we're back on the negative rush totals because those are always fun as well. Colin, I know you have your lock of the week here, so just we've been doing very well on locks of the week, Colin. So don't screw this up for us.
Well, my lock of the week last week was the Troy Franklin one. The other one that I played was Jeff Sims, which did not go out very well. But my lock of the week this week, Riley Leonard over 37.5 rush yards. He didn't have that last week, but they didn't need him to do that last week. In the Clemson game, he had 98 yards rushing in game 1 of the season. And he went over this 37.5 number in 9 of 13 games last year. We like Duke's rushing attack against this Northwestern team that is bad, like we've talked about all day. I don't really see any way he doesn't go over 37.5 yards rushing. He can get that in one run, and we've seen him do it. So I think that's my favorite play of the week. My second play is Kyle McCord under 306.5 pass yards. He was named the starter this week. It really wouldn't surprise me if this game gets out of hand, especially with all the pieces that Western Kentucky's missing on offense and how good Ohio State's defense has looked so far this year. They've given up 7 points and 3 points. Now, granted, that was to Indiana and Youngstown State, but there's a lot of pieces from this Western Kentucky offense missing. I think this gets out of hand. I think Ohio State runs the ball all over them, like I talked about with Travion Henderson. So if it gets out of hand, I could see Devin Brown getting in a little bit too. I just don't see too many paths where McCord goes over this 306 yards because even last week he only had 258. So I like the under on that play.
Okay.
Or less than.
You guys are building a ticket for me here. We're getting close. Thank you. Alfred, bring us home. Let's see if I like any of these to add them here to my final plays for the day.
I don't know if you'll like any of these. By the way, the Will Rogers, kind of love that. I mean, LSU's D-line is disgusting, and we saw them just tear FSU up. So that's a great one, Chris. Caleb Hood over 12.5 fantasy points. You know, the Georgia Southern is going to throw the ball a ton. They're going to throw a lot of short passes. And I just think that they're going to still move the ball a little bit. They're still going to put up, rinky-dink little passing stats, and he's 1 point less than Burgess, their other receiver. So kind of think both of them, still get theirs. You don't even have to score a touchdown to go over 12.5 fantasy points with PPR. So I think, 6 or 7 catches, get the yards, go over, not too hard. And I think it's depressed probably because they're, favored to not do well against Wisconsin, but I think they'll still find grass to throw to. And then Carson Beck under 20.5 fantasy points. That just feels like a lot for Carson Beck. Georgia has not played anybody yet. And South Carolina is not that formidable, but it's an SEC team. I think they're going to be hyped for this game. Obviously, anytime, Georgia at this point, everybody's going to get their best game. And, I just think he's not, I mean, that number should be closer to 17.5. I think 20.5 just feels too high for a guy that's not really going to run. He probably needs 3 touchdowns, no turnovers to get over 20. I'm not sure I see that there in this game that I feel like might be kind of low scoring. And I'm not going to say my third one because I really don't have a good backup for that. So just those 2. Okay. I don't want to give out bad information.
Fair enough. I liked all those. I actually really like Will Howard over 18.5 fantasy score today as well. That's floating around. I think he has a pretty good day.
To comment on that really quickly, that number has moved towards Missouri yesterday and today. I think that's kind of interesting because a lot of people have been talking about taking Kansas State confidently, and I'm not quite sure.
I haven't bet that game. What's it at now?
It was at 5. Now it's at 3.
Okay.
It's hovering between 3 and 3.5, depending on where you look. But I mean, it was 4 and 5 for a lot of the week. So sharp money's back in Missouri. I don't necessarily know what's up with that because I don't have a play on that game, but I would lean Kansas State.
They're probably subscribed to the C2C winning edge tier at Campus2Canton because our projections have Missouri as an outright favorite, which I don't personally trust. We've got a few. Week 3 can always be a little bit tricky, but yeah, that was one that definitely caught my eye. Have Mizzou favored.
Sounds like Johnny Wilson is dressed for Florida State, by the way. A guy that we were wondering whether he'd play or not. There was some iffy news on that.
Are you starting him?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
If it wasn't rainy or supposed to be rainy and windy, I would consider it. But
you probably won't find a bigger Johnny Wilson fan than me, and I'm not starting him anywhere this week.
You won't find a bigger Johnny Wilson hater than me.
That might not be true. There seem to be a few out there.
I don't like Johnny Wilson that much.
Very polarizing player, no matter how you look at it. All right. Some other injuries. Nick, do you have any that you're monitoring here today? It does sound like Malachi Corley is going to play. And I actually do trust him against Ohio State. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think that Corley's in a decent spot. There hasn't been a lot of late morning updates that I've seen, but one that caught my eye earlier, Indiana's EJ Williams is out. I'm not sure if I mentioned that in the start Jalen Lucas discussion, but Cam Camper went out with an injury last week. Sounds like he is back, but EJ Williams is going to miss this week. We've mentioned that Quinshon Judkins is doubtful. Trey Harris is out for Ole Miss. At Virginia Tech, Grant Wells and Jalen Lane are both game time decisions, as is Michael Pratt at Tulane. Haven't seen an update on him yet, but Florida State, in addition to Johnny Wilson, is going to be without 2 offensive linemen for sure. They're starting center and left tackle and a safety on defense. So I'm tempted, even though it's really been moving the last few days, to include Boston College as a potential top pick here shortly.
I can get to 27.
Do it.
I kind of like it. I'm thinking about that cover as well, guys.
Our guys, Chris K and Ethan Sowers over on Campus2Canton have talked about that this could potentially be a look-ahead spot for Florida State as well, seeing that they get Clemson next week. So any thought on that playing a role in the line?
Listen, gross.
I can't put a number on look ahead, so that's tough for me. But the numbers that I do put in are a little higher on Boston College than the general feeling there, which is of course not good. So that's definitely a
Tommy Castellanos is a wild card, baby.
They should have lost.
Player.
I love that guy.
Pat Garlow is questionable as well for Boston College early in the week. I haven't seen an update on that yet.
Has there been a more mid player that's been around for forever than Pat Garlow?
Oh my goodness.
He was pretty good his first year.
I remember Chris and I talking, I think, on one of our now defunct DFS shows. I remember talking about playing Pat Garlow. This is like 3 or 4 years ago at this point.
I still have him highlighted as an all-conference player. I don't remember when that was, but he's in the team profiles. He's got the gold tag. He was first or second team All-ACC at some point.
There you go.
Proud of him.
I just have such a tough time backing this BC team who should have lost to Holy Cross last week. Did not. I think we gave Holy Cross to cover on this show.
We did. I played it. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. But yeah, I don't trust this team at all. It doesn't matter what this number gets to. I just can't back them.
That's fair enough. All right. Well, speaking of guys that we've liked for a long time, or guys we think have NFL draft potential here, our Devy guys bring you a short segment every week covering some names you need to watch this week. So let's dive into that here, I believe, with Corey this week.
What is going on, Campus2Canton family? Corey Prairie here from the Campus2Canton Devy team. Week 3 is here, and it's not the most competitive week, especially from a Power 5 standpoint or a ranking standpoint, but there's still a lot to look forward here from a Devy standpoint. Let's go. Now, I want to start off here by looking at a couple of freshmen, some freshman running back in particular. It's always a good idea to keep an eye on these freshmen, especially when they're breaking out at an early point, because that early production does a lot for their chances to make the NFL later in their career. Minnesota freshman running back Darius Taylor looked awesome last week against Eastern Michigan. 19 carries, 139 for 1 touchdown. And this wasn't even a case of a blowout either. This is a guy who got into the game within the second quarter. It was only 3-0 on the board. This was a game they didn't even win by over 20 points. This is an interesting prospect who was a top 25 running back in the class, has a background as a pass catcher as well, was a former wide receiver convert in high school. At 5'11", 210 pounds, this is the kind of guy that we should be keeping an eye on. And we know how that Minnesota backfield produces a lot of production from that running back position. The other freshman running back that I want to talk about is heading over to BYU, where freshman LJ Martin has gone 22 for 118 over the past 2 weeks. He's looked much better than the guy they brought in to be the starter, Aiden Robinson, coming from the G5 from UNLV. But LJ Martin has just looked a lot better behind this line right now. He's officially been named the starter going into this week, so it looks like they're going to ride the freshman running back. He's got a tough matchup this week against Arkansas, but if he can put up a nice game against these guys, this is the kind of thing that could really throw a guy on the Devy radar. Is Michigan wide receiver Roman Wilson this year's Jalen Hyatt? Now, I don't necessarily mean that from an offensive standpoint or a production standpoint. I mean, these guys operate in very different roles. They came from very different offenses. If anything, Michigan's offense is probably respected a little bit more from the NFL. But when you look at their profiles, they actually share a lot of similarities. These guys were both decent ranking prospects in their draft class. The Devy community liked them as prospects and kind of wrote them off after really slow starts to their career. And then we saw Jalen Hyatt kind of blow up before entering the NFL. Now, Roman Wilson is kind of doing the same thing. They're also pretty similar prospects from a build standpoint. I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, Roman Wilson is a certified freak. I mean, as a prospect, he's got a 4.37 verified 40, 39-inch vertical, sub 4-second shuttle at 6 foot, 180 pounds. I mean, this is the kind of build that Jalen Hyatt had. This is the kind of build that the NFL likes nowadays. It's the type of athleticism that leading up to the draft is going to turn a lot of heads. If he continues this kind of production going throughout the year, this could help him earn some day 2 draft capital in next year's draft class. Now, there's not a lot of great games when you look at the matchups this week, but there is one game on the slate that I've kind of got my eyes on from a Devy standpoint, and that's Mizzou going up against Kansas State. Now, starting over at Mizzou with sophomore wide receiver Luther Burden, there were still some people out there that were kind of disappointed with the 5.6 ADOT from week 1, even though his role is expanding and we should see some more production this year. Well, I'm here to tell you that last week he had a 12.9 average depth of target last week. He was going above the rim to catch the ball. He was making contested catches. He's already caught 3 of 4 contested catches, which matches his total from last year, and he's already caught the same amount of 20-plus yard balls down the field that he did all last year. You're starting to see that they're expanding his route tree a little bit, putting more onto his plate, and he's starting to excel in his new role, which is exactly what we want to see to keep him as a top 5 Devy wide receiver. Now, starting over at Kansas State, they actually got quite a few interesting prospects from an NFL draft perspective, starting over at the tight end position with tight end Benson Knott, who had a really strong connection once Will Howard took over last year, really put down a strong performance down the stretch, opened it up with another strong performance to start the year this year. It was kind of quiet last year, but he opened up as Dean Brugel's early tight end 3 in his early 2024 draft rankings, so he's definitely a guy that we need to be keeping an eye on. Speaking of quarterback Will Howard, in a quarterback class that really doesn't have a lot of answers after the top 2 guys, he's a pretty interesting prospect who's came on really strong last year after taking over at Kansas State and taking them to a Big 12 championship last year. Over the last 7 games of the season, he threw for the most yards, the most touchdowns, the second highest average depth of target, and the second fewest interceptions in the Big 12. He's already accounted for over 585 yards and 7 touchdowns over the first 2 weeks of the season. He's just a really interesting prospect that I think displays the arm talent and the football IQ to earn himself a mid-round selection in the NFL draft. And last but not least, I want to talk about a little bit of a sleeper here, a little bit of a quarterback that's been making some waves early in the season. That's Stanford sophomore quarterback Ashton Daniels, who surprisingly earned the starting role heading into the season this year. Now, this was a 3-star kid with some good size and some good dual threat ability, and the thing that popped out to me the most was just how accurate he was down the field. He was dropping the ball in the basket on numerous occasions. In his first start versus Hawaii, he was credited with 3 big-time throws, a 10-yard ADOT, and just under 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. But maybe even more impressive was his 0 interceptions and his 0 sacks taken in his first collegiate start. Now, he got injured early in the following week versus USC, so we never really got to see how he would have performed against a better opponent like that. This week's not much better. He gets a cupcake matchup against Sacramento State, but it looks like he's fully ready and fully healthy to go. This should be a nice confidence booster for him going into the rest of the season. But that about wraps up the Devy Sesh for this week, guys. Make sure you guys are checking out the Back to Devy podcast every Wednesday morning, the #1 Devy podcast on the Campus2Canton Devy feed. Don't let anybody else tell you different, and make sure you guys are keeping it locked with Campus2Canton for everything you need throughout the season.
Oh boy, we got a big one. We got a big card here. We got
baby, let's go.
We got a super rookie.
Ooh.
Do you guys want to guess who the big card super rookie is? Because
I'm going to guess
exciting.
somebody from the Dallas Cowboys, but I don't recall who were rookies in those particular years. So I'm going to guess Michael Irvin.
Adam?
Jared kind of convinced me to go Troy Aikman there.
I'm going to read the description. In this player's NFL debut, September 10th, 1989, he produced an electrifying 68-yard punt return for a touchdown.
Sanders.
He became the first athlete in the 20th century to hit a home run, September 5th, 1989, for the Yankees at Seattle, and score a touchdown in the same week.
That needs a sleeve. That one needs a sleeve.
Top
100%.
super rookie, neon, prime time, Deion Sanders.
I wasn't that far off. He played for the Cowboys.
I was going to say Deion, and then when you said the early 90s Cowboys, I'm like, oh, Aikman would be a good guess. So I go with your gut is the lesson there.
And there it is, the white and red Falcon jerseys that you said Deion came in with before they changed to black.
That was because the starting lineup for Deion his rookie year has got the red helmet with the white jersey.
Now look at that do. I mean, are you kidding me with that hair?
I mean, you got to have a headband with those curls. You got to.
That is sick. And this is a favorite card. Do we have any value on this card? We have to, right?
Let me see.
Give me a value here.
Let's see here on eBay. PSA 10 gem mint Deion Sanders, $149.99. And then a 9.5 is $6. So that guy might be a little bit then there's a much more reasonably listed one at $31 for a PSA 10. So it's got some value to it. Yeah, you might want to protect that one.
It's in excellent condition. I guess we have to worry about, is it centered?
Yes, that would be the next thing.
All right. Well, we'll go through the process there. Maybe I'll just frame that one as a great moment in this show's history.
Man, something about a marching band. This feels right as that air gets a little colder on Saturday mornings. I tell you what. This is the Tailgate, Campus2Canton crew here with the help from our friends here at Better Sports. Nick, Chris, Alfred, Colin, and myself here with you today. Before we talk some last injury news here and some betting, the BetterCast, guys, if you haven't heard of it, we're gamifying week 2 of the NFL on the BetterCast app. Pregame questions are now live. So go ahead, download that app, submit your picks now, join the BetterCast during the games on Sunday and predict what will happen and test your NFL knowledge. Chat with the community about all the big plays, top performers, and busts in real time. No purchase or subscription necessary. Anybody is free to play. Watch NFL Week 2 with us, play our free contest, and win tickets. The more questions you answer, the more tickets you win. You can redeem those tickets for authentic NFL signed gear and collectibles. Everybody loves those. So go ahead, hop in there now. Download that BetterCast app. Must be at least 18 years of age to participate. One final injury update that we did get before we went to break that we didn't get a chance to say. It sounds like George Holani, the running back for Boise State, is out. What does that do for Ashton Genty today, who had a nice week last week without him? And we still actually don't know what's going on with their quarterback situation either this week, right? So there were some rumors that there might be some injury there, Chris?
He was hurt at the end of last week. I'm not. It sounds like he's going to play. I haven't seen anything that he isn't. But yeah, they're missing a couple pieces today as well. So it sounds like we're going to get Taylor Green though. I'm not starting Taylor Green if that's the question though. Even though it's North Dakota, the usage of him has not been good. It's been frankly bizarre. They aren't running him, and he isn't that good of a passer. So I don't know what's going on there.
We had Genty in our top running backs for the week, so it sounds like he's definitely there to stay. With that news, fire up your Genty shares. All right, Nick, Chris, best picks here for the week. We went 4-0 week 1. You guys got a little cocky week 2, and you said maybe we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. 4-5 last week, picked a lot more games. Didn't go as well, but still 8-5 on the year. We're going back to our roots this week, though. I can feel it. We're gonna have a good week. I'm about to make some plays here. Tell me what where I should be putting my money this week, Nick.
Well, this is totally my fault because I went 0-3, I think, last week. This week I lost one of my, am not able to share one of mine from earlier in the week because the line has moved too much in our direction. So I had to make a late switch there on Nebraska to cover. Our 3 projection models, typically, if they all line up on a favorite, that's a very, very good sign. And we have that situation with UAB when we listed it in the Discord on Tuesday. It was at UAB -1.5 versus Louisiana today. That's now 2.5 last I saw. And the projection models, at least the primary one that I look to, our team strength model, has this as over a touchdown. So I'm pretty well bought in on UAB at this point. And my numbers just really, really dislike Louisiana. So those 2 items combined, seems like there's some value there for the Blazers to win and cover. I added a couple of late ones, might regret it, but just saw some news actually that makes me feel a little bit better about Mississippi State +9.5 against LSU. This is one where the models all line up and there's such a big projected edge that it makes me very skeptical. I don't always, when the numbers see too big of a gap, sometimes that makes me a little more nervous than confident, but I have this as basically a toss-up. Mississippi State is less than a quarter of a point underdog in our primary model at home against LSU today. The two other models, one that looks at only talent, has it only about a 1 point gap, and one that looks at only stats only has it at about a field goal. So a lot of value across the board. And we just got confirmation that LSU is going to be without linebacker Omar Spates today, and then a surprise, Greg Brooks, starting safety, is going to be out. So that's two starters on defense for LSU, which hasn't been incorporated into any of the models, and already saw some value on Mississippi State. So like that one as well. And then one that had just kind of been sticking in my mind all week that I decided that I would just go ahead and say it. ULM plus 36.5 against Texas A&M. This ULM team beat Army, right? And we saw what they did to UTSA last night. I don't expect them to keep this game close in the fourth quarter by any means, but 36.5 is a lot of points. This is a better ULM team, I think, than we expected. They're playing decently, and yeah, Texas A&M has a sort of a get right spot, but I think that there's a chance that maybe they come out a little little slow, and ULM maybe can surprise with an early score or something, and 36.5 might just be too much to overcome for the Aggies today.
Should we sprinkle the money line on that?
No, absolutely not.
Come on, little $5.
Hey, Alfred, it's your money. I'm not going to tell everybody to just flush their cash down the toilet, but if that's what you want to do, then, that, more power to you. You're really enjoying living in a state now that has legalized sports gambling, aren't you?
It's going to be a problem. Or, maybe I'll just get rich.
Or you're retiring by 45. Yeah. I think those are your only two options there. Chris, what are your best bets this week?
So I felt like I had a pretty good week last week. Overall, I feel like I was pretty plugged into the FBS versus FCS games. I think we gave out like 3 on here, and I think they all hit. Not as much value this week on those, but I do have one that I really like, and that's Sacramento State plus 7.5 versus Stanford. It's I wouldn't call it a homecoming. It's Stanford's head coach, Troy Taylor, coached Sacramento State last year. I'm not convinced that Stanford's defense is going to be able to contain Caden Bennett, who's the quarterback for Sacramento State. I expect this game to be somewhat high scoring, and that plays into Sacramento State's favor. They're a pretty electric offense, and I like this team. I think they're a top 5-ish FCS team. Really good on offense. I think they can score. I think they can keep up with Stanford. A touchdown is just too much. I actually have Sacramento State favored, to be honest. But I just think a touchdown, you're getting a lot of value. So, touchdown and a hook. You're getting a lot of value on this Sacramento State team. Then I don't think is materially that much worse than Stanford. How far is for Sacramento from Palo Alto? Does anybody know?
You're the guy who's got
they're both Northern California, so
you don't have Google Maps up to.
Was it the sleep in the bed factor?
The wind blowing in Palo Alto is the question.
That's a good question. I will. You keep talking. I'll find out whether it's in 100 miles.
All right, but yeah. So I have Sacramento State favored. I think you can play the money line if you're feeling a little dangerous. One thing that I like to note is how the special teams are on some of these teams, because if the special teams are good, then that gives the FCS team a little bit of an edge, because they could do more things. They don't have to go for it every fourth down. And this kicker is pretty good for Sacramento State. He's a transfer in, Zach Schreiner. He's been kicking he's made all extra points last year. He's only missed 1 field goal so far. So I just like that little edge. That makes me feel a little bit more confident. Another number I talked about earlier in the show was Charlotte plus 7.5 for Georgia State. I'm not sure that Charlotte's worse than Georgia State, period. I think they might actually be a little bit better. But, you're getting a touchdown and a half point again on this line. I think Charlotte's a live dog here as well. I thought the offense played really well last week. Not impressed by Georgia State's defense, even though they contained Connecticut. Cool, you contained UConn. Not really Not really that impressed with what they're doing. I think this game's going to be pretty high scoring as well. I think Charlotte can keep up. I actually really like what I've seen from Charlotte the first 2 weeks. I think Biv Pogge's kind of onto something there.
Called this a
give
must
me
win.
that one. Sorry?
He called this game a must win, which seems a little premature for me, but
Yeah, 3 games into your tenure.
He's a little dramatic, as we saw at their media day this year, for what it's worth.
He is. But I really like what I've seen from the Charlotte team so far. Trying to think if I want to give out the last 2, because my numbers are kind of close and they've moved against me. I'll tell you, they're not as high priority as the first 2, but I'll tell you what I have. I think Georgia Southern's going to cover that 20.5 versus Wisconsin. It was 19. It's now 20.5 again. Wisconsin has not impressed me on offense really at all. This game's going to be high scoring. I think Georgia Southern can score. That's just like almost 3 touchdowns is a lot to ask from a Wisconsin team that I don't think is clicking quite yet with the Dairy Raid. They might at the end of the year, but that game against Washington State was really unimpressive. But maybe they just run the ball, and that's what happens, and they contain the offense. But if you're going to give me almost 3 touchdowns, I think I'm going to back Georgia Southern because I really liked what I've seen from this offense. And I think Brian Ellis, the offensive coordinator for Georgia Southern, is going to be like the next hot name. He can call some plays. No, I'm not going to get out the last one. That one is a little. What was Cam Rising playing today?
I haven't seen confirmation either way on that. I'm not sure we'll know until closer to game time.
If Cameron Rising doesn't play, I'm on Weber State plus 28 to cover against Utah. I think that number is a little big if we're getting Nate Johnson and not Cam Rising.
So, Chris, I want to ask you some things around that Wisconsin-Georgia Southern game because I do find that interesting. If you can find a 21 somewhere, would you play that?
Yeah, for sure. Even if it's like a little juice. I mean, Bet Rivers has been giving out some like 7 cents for a point, which is a lot, like not nearly enough through key numbers. So, I mean, I bet you could find that this morning. So if you get like minus 117 for 21, I mean, I'd be all over that. I don't know if there's 21s currently out there, like listed numbers. I don't really like buying points, but if you're buying half a point for 7 cents, I mean, that's not a bad value.
I have a couple other props from this game that I think are really interesting that I also want to ask you about. It looks like you can get plus money on Davis Brin some places over 1.5 passing touchdowns.
I mean, that's how they're going to score, probably. I mean,
I don't think they're going to score rushing touchdowns. Yeah. So, well, I mean, they might. Their running backs aren't bad. But.
Yeah. No, what's the value there?
Plus 110 for over 1.5 passing touchdowns.
I don't think that's bad value.
Okay. How about their receivers? They've got 45.5 yards for Caleb Hood and 60.5 for Burgess. Nick, you do your projections as well. I mean, how are those in line with what you've got for either of those guys by any chance?
So let's see. For Georgia Southern receivers, who I do think this is a pretty good matchup. This week, I've got Burgess projected for 16.5 points in PPR, 14.2 for Caleb Hood. So those, yeah, pretty. I feel like Georgia Southern is definitely going to be able to move the ball, and feel like it's a decent spot.
Well, part of it also is this offense is almost identical to what they saw last week and struggled mightily with last week at Washington. I mean, 106th in passing success rate, 78th in EPA per pass. I mean, those aren't great numbers for Wisconsin defense, especially against a really good, in my estimation, passing offense at Georgia Southern.
All right, I hit it. So there we go. Thanks, guys. All right, let's get into our games of the week here. We're picking these 5. All lines come from DraftKings as of late yesterday afternoon, so they might have moved, half a point, something like that. But nothing too crazy going on there. Let's start with LSU, number 14 LSU at Mississippi State. 9.5 is the line there, as we discussed earlier. Nick, what do you like?
Well, I mean, this is very close to a game in which I would have Mississippi State favored. So week 3, because we do change things up a little bit, incorporate team performance ratings from this season for the first time. It's a small sample, so even though it's not a huge piece of the equation puzzle as far as our team strength ratings go, it does sometimes give us a couple of projections that make you raise your eye a little bit. But Mississippi State, at home against an LSU team that is banged up defensively, I think is struggling a little bit defensively, and a Mississippi State team that has shown the ability, even though they're not super efficient on the ground, can run the ball a little bit. Jaquavius Marks off to a strong start. I do feel like this is a game that Mississippi State's going to be able to keep it close, and 9.5 is a lot of points for a home team, and in a conference game for sure. So I got to stick with the numbers, I guess.
Chris?
Yeah, I actually gave out LSU -9 in the Discord this morning. I watched that Mississippi State game last week against Arizona, and it was really bad. I mean, they took this offense is like totally neutered, not playing to Will Rogers' strengths. I just don't like what I've seen. Vibes are bad, man. In Stark Vegas. I mean, I'm really not wanting to back this team, so I'll take LSU. I felt more comfortable at 9. 10's kind of a big ask, but yeah, if you want to play this game, I think if 9 isn't available, I would take an LSU alt line because I think it could get away from Mississippi State.
Colin?
Yeah, I think Starkville is a tough place to play, but like Chris was saying, I think this Mississippi State offense has just been absolutely neutered. I don't love that Omar Spates isn't going to be out there because he's a very good run coverage linebacker. He's good against the run. I think that's what Mississippi State does primarily, but I still think it's too much for Mississippi State. Give me LSU here, even at -9.5.
Alfred?
Yeah, I'm not going to belabor the point. Give me LSU for all the reasons stated. I think Mississippi State has no identity, like Chris said. I don't think they know what they want to do.
I don't like heights. I don't like spiders. I don't like picking opposite of Nick in this exercise.
Oh,
but I'm going to do it. I'm doing it. I'm taking LSU anyway. I don't care. Washington, number 8 Washington against Michigan State here this week. This is 16.5 points. Kickoff at 5 Eastern. Nick, we'll come over to you here again. I mean, this is scary stuff here today, man.
I do lean heavily into the numbers, and this week there are some numbers that I don't necessarily personally agree with, but of course can't, or at least I don't know a way to account for some of the off the field stuff that obviously is worth considering at Michigan State. But this Michigan State defense through 2 weeks has played really well defensively. Washington is a team that I feel like my numbers do a pretty good job with, have the last couple of years, and very high on Washington. They're top 10 in my power ratings. They are playing at an incredible pace offensively, or not pace. They're actually kind of slow offensively in pace, but they're just incredibly efficient and one of the best offenses in the country. So it should be strength versus strength. Again, a team that is getting quite a lot of points at home, and feel like Michigan State might be just improved enough defensively to keep this game close heading into the fourth quarter before Washington pulls away, and hopefully they don't pull away by 3 scores. So I'm on Michigan State, and confidence is not necessarily high. There are definitely some things that I can't account for going on here, but I think this Michigan State team defensively is playing well enough that I don't completely hate the projection.
Chris, you told us to bet this months ago, and I don't think this line has moved too much since then.
We actually gave it out in the Discord and on here at 12.5. Got a lot of value.
Okay.
I'm still back in Washington, though. I don't like this Michigan State. Vibes are real bad right now in East Lansing. Give me Washington.
Colin?
Yeah, like Nick said you can't always account for some of the off the field stuff in the numbers, but I think that this Michigan State team is looking rough right now with everything going on with Mel Tucker. I mean, maybe they get a little boost from D'Antonio reportedly having some sort of a role here, but I think this Washington team is just head and shoulders better. Give me Washington even at 16.5.
Alfred?
Yeah, I'm not going to rock the boat here. And I've understood a little more of Nick's process because the first week we did this, I really was like, I value his opinion so much. But he's even said himself sometimes, the numbers are the numbers. And he's like, doesn't even agree sometimes. So I feel a little bit better going with vibes when it's appropriate. And I agree, Michigan State, I don't know. This doesn't seem like the kind of thing that you mentally rally around. If there's like an untimely death or something and the team can really gel, but this is different. I think they might just be messed up, and I think Washington's a great team, and so I would take Washington here. I think they're gonna have a big day.
I'm taking Washington as well. 11 Tennessee, 5.5 point favorites at Florida. Is an interesting one. Nick, come to you first here. What do you like?
I'm on Tennessee. There's been a little bit of disappointment for Tennessee offensively so far this year. I'm a huge Joe Milton fan, and it has not gone according to plan. The receiving core has not gone according to plan so far, but I think that, or I'm at least optimistic that maybe we see a little bit of a breakout here with the obviously very tough environment going on the road to the Swamp. But perhaps we'll see our first glimpse at Tennessee playing its best football to date, and Milton and guys like Squirrel White and that receiving core hopefully breaking out a little bit, and Tennessee being able to win by more than a touchdown.
Chris?
I liked Florida when it was 7.5. Now that it's under a touchdown, give me Tennessee. Don't really like backing Graham Mertz.
Colin?
Yeah, I think this line being under a touchdown makes me go with Tennessee, even though I am a little bit worried about their pass attack with some of the injuries and not getting deep. So to also answer B Fresh's question, you give me Jordan Travis over Joe Milton in this one because I'm a little worried about Joe Milton's numbers. But give me Tennessee.
Some inappropriate comments coming in the chat that we're not going to address about Mel Tucker here today. But thank you for that, Felix. Alfred, you're definitely not a homer. No affiliation with the University of Florida whatsoever, right? I mean, there's no connection here.
I'm not a homer because I hate watch my team. So I'm definitely getting close to like rooting for losses. And it's pretty typical for the second year of a Florida head coach tenure. I start rooting for losses. Let's just swipe the board clean and start over. I'm really excited for the potential of hiring Deion Sanders next year, maybe. So anyway, but today I'm going Florida. I think that my hope here is that Joe Milton is not as good as people seem to think. He throws the ball 90 yards, but in a high-pressure environment, I think people are still going to games in Gainesville, and it's still Tennessee week, so they should be pretty rowdy. But, I think he makes mistakes, and, maybe we see some cracks in Joe Milton there. And, I think we win maybe a low-scoring game, kind of ugly. But
give us a gator chomp. Give us a gator chomp. There we go.
Let's go.
That's what we needed. I'm taking Tennessee.
You probably should.
Pitt at WVU. My Panthers. Dare I say our Panthers? No, nobody with me. Okay. West Virginia 2.5 point favorites at home. Nick, don't break my heart.
No, I'm on Pitt to win outright, which I was a little surprised that this one moved the other direction. But the model I like the best has Pitt favored by more than a field goal.
Cool. Chris?
Give me Pitt. Wrong team favored.
Colin?
Yeah, as much as it pains me, I would take Pitt in this one. I think wrong team's favored here. I think West Virginia's just not very good.
Alfred.
Weird things happen in West Virginia in the night games. I'm just going. I don't like betting against West Virginia at home at night. I don't like betting against Wyoming and Laramie, like I said last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. So sometimes there's just some situational things I'm not going to go against, even though I agree Pitt's probably better.
I'm taking Pitt. Was there a doubt? Sweet Caroline, baby. Sweet.
Go
Caroline.
Panthers.
TCU, 7-point favorites at Houston. This is the latest game we're picking here today. Let's run through here real quick, guys. Give me in a sentence or less. Who do you like here?
For me, confidence is an all-time low, but I'm on Houston, and they're actually projected as an outright winner in my model.
I'm on TCU. Fade Dana Holgorsen until further notice.
I'm going to take Houston here because the line's at a touchdown, but I don't feel great about it. Give me Houston.
Alfred.
I like Houston as well. And last year was the year to fade Holgorsen. He lost that locker room, but I think this year's new year, and I think they look okay.
Houston for me as well. All right. Thanks for tuning in here with us this week, guys. Good luck on your betting, your prize picks, your fantasy, everything today. We'll be back here again next week.